remember after I had my first, we brought him home and I was in the bedroom and I held him and I was like, what did I do?
Mm.
Like it felt to me like Groundhog Day. It felt to
Mhm.
me like I never felt success.
I feel like that's something that we're not allowed to say out loud.
Mhm.
Can you speak to women who are listening to you right now and be like, wait, am I allowed to feel like, yes, I can have my kids and love them and spend time with them, but also have other interests?
I think you have to kind of think about, does anybody ever say to your husband, are you going to go back to work? No one ever said that to my
Right.
husband. I went to college. I did a year of volunteer service after college. Like I knew I had so much to offer. So if you have this desire in your heart, what I like to tell people is like your desires provide you with direction. I think that's really important. And I don't see enough women really owning their expertise. We're so ingrained in kind of that corporate mentality of like, this is how we have to do things. So I think it's having an open mind to those desires.
Today, we're talking to Meg O'Neill, co-founder of the Intuitive Marketing Collective agency and host of the Intuitive Marketing podcast with Chelsea Fournier. We're going to be talking about her a little bit. And she is a community building expert, and I'm so excited to have her on the podcast today. Hi, Meg. Thank you for being here.
Hello. I'm so honored to be here. I'm so excited.
And I can't wait to really dive into your story because in my research, I learned so many things that I really feel like we need to talk about.
Ooh.
So I am so excited to have you. But before we start, why don't you tell everybody what is it that you do and who you help right now?
Yeah. So currently I am the co-founder of the Intuitive Marketing Collective, and we help healers, authors, speakers get their voice out into the world through their marketing. So I head up the social media division, and then my partner Chelsea heads up the other side where she does everything from email funnels to website design. We also run a community called the Intuitive Business Community. And that is like one of my most like favorite parts. I love, love, love bringing women together and supporting them, having them share their ideas with one another. And I just find that to be the most like rewarding part of the job.
We met on TikTok, like in a TikTok program that we were
Mhm.
both taking. And then I found out later that you are partnering with Chelsea, who I knew from like when I first started my business online. I found her and actually did a feature on her on YouTube.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
doing this thing where I would find really cool people and I would feature them and get to know them better. And that's how she and I met. So when I found
I
out you
love
two
that.
were working together, it was like, well, it's like worlds
Worlds
colliding,
colliding. Exactly.
right?
When she said to me, she showed, I don't know, I think she said something once and she said, one of my biz besties. We like talk all the time and stuff. And I was like, oh my God,
It's like
like I know her from TikTok and we were in a mastermind together.
it's like
And
it's such a small
it
world,
is,
the
even
online world,
online.
right?
Yeah.
Such a small world. So I want everybody to hear that this agency that you started with Chelsea, this is not where you started. This was not
Mm-mm.
the first even venture online that you did.
Mm.
You actually co-founded at like a pre and post natal wellness center, which was a
Mhm.
brick and mortar
Mhm.
business. And it was like all the marketing for it was really very heavily based on your story, on what
Mhm.
you had gone through. So I want to kind of go back there so that everybody knows like your background of where you started and where you came from, because that story is just amazing. So first of all, how did you end up starting that wellness center?
So I am originally from New York and I moved up to Massachusetts after living in Philadelphia for 2 years. I went to college up here, so I came back here with friends and my husband, who was my college boyfriend, and I got back together. And after we got married, we had our child first. Out of like all of our friends, I'm the oldest of 5 kids. So I was the first one to kind of experience going through pregnancy and motherhood. And at the core, I was always a community based person. Like anything that I was part of, I started to bring community into it. So after I had my first son, during my pregnancy, I was going to like a little yoga and fitness place with a woman named Susie. And I was going at least 2 times a week just because I wanted to be around other pregnant women. I wanted to, build a community, build a resource, kind of like network for myself. So she was not into social media. And I just saw such an opportunity. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I will run your social media for you for free in trade of, like, coming to classes." And at the time, there was, like, 300 people that followed them on Facebook.
Yeah.
So I started doing that, and it was just such a passion project. I asked her if I could also start an in-person moms group. So I did it, and it's really funny because I just recently told the story, and the first time, one woman came, Kristen Curtis,
Mm.
and that was, 13 years ago.
Wow.
And first of all, I was scared about, like, who would actually show up. What was I gonna talk to them about? Because I was like, I was 27, 28, like, I didn't have any parenting advice. Like, it was just purely for community.
Mhm.
So, we get, in this little space, and we're sitting on the rug, she has her baby in the carrier, and we're just chatting, and we come back the next week, and it keeps growing. And we got to the point where I remember our first Halloween, we had, like, 27 babies lined up.
Oh, wow.
And people were just sharing their stories. They were sharing about their feeding journeys. They were sharing about their, transition with their partner to like motherhood and how that was. And I saw how authentically women opened up and how much they needed each other.
Mhm.
So I still live in the same town and I still see women that met in that group who are best friends today. The woman that I mentioned, Kristen Curtis, is now a healer, has her own business around Akashic Records, all these things. She's done my programs years ago, and then now we're in a business like networking group together. And I came to speak at her networking group, and I was like, that one day we sat there just like exchanging like truly like heartfelt like what we were going through as moms. And now we have like stayed connected through that whole time in completely different businesses. We weren't even doing businesses then.
Yeah.
So, long story short, that was also the time when breast pumps were being covered by insurance. And a local medical product company had come to tell us about that in the moms group. And when the guy was leaving, I had said, "Hey, if you ever need anyone to work for you, there's like I would love to work for you." And he pretty much hired me on the spot to test out breast pumps.
Wow.
So I started testing out breast pumps for him and then doing the customer service. And that company wanted to really turn it into a maternal wellness center. So that's when they approached Susie. We all worked together and opened up like they invested about close to $1 million into a brick and mortar space where we got to really lead and grow this massive community in our town. So it was pretty incredible.
How did you see yourself in that moment? Because I imagine that, this kind of falls on your lap, but not really. Like you
Mhm.
set a lot of groundwork to create the opportunity for this to even happen, right? For this opportunity to come. But what were you doing at the time? Like you had your son,
Mhm.
which, I understand, he is autistic
Mhm.
and, that can be a toll in itself. That can
Mhm.
be a job in itself. So how were you seeing your life and where all these pieces fit? Like what was going on at the time?
I think when I became a mom, I had this vision my entire life. As I said, I'm the oldest of 5. My mom was really dedicated to being a mother, and that in my head was always, like, my ultimate goal. Like, I didn't worry as much as, like, what I was gonna be, or I was gonna be a mom and then whatever else I was. But once I became a mom, I was like, "Whoa, this is exactly what I wanna do all the time." Like, it felt to me like Groundhog Day. It felt to
Hmm.
me like I never felt success. Like, by the end of the day, there's always something that I can improve upon. So, when I was really, bringing this community together and having flexibility, I was like, "I really like this. I really like to see myself connecting all of these women." And then the other part of it is I've had a natural ability throughout my life to, like, be that big sister. Like, people will just send me random texts like, "Where do you go to get your hair done?" Or, "How do you do this with, something?" And then as I was sharing a little bit more about my son's journey, a lot of people were saying to me, "I think my child's not talking yet. What should I do?" Um, so I saw myself as this resource. I wanted to be this resource for people. And not only did it help them, but it helped me too, because it helped me process. It helped me. I was already doing so much research and stuff to share that with people felt like, it felt like service. And I really enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah. And I can say that I completely relate to that
Mhm.
feeling to like, you know, loving our kids and at the same time wanting to
Mhm.
do other things
Yeah.
and wanting to impact people's lives. And I feel like that's something that we're not allowed to say out loud.
Mhm.
That for some reason, having an interest that is outside of our kids' lives, it's already marked as, and internally too, like we tell ourselves we are being selfish.
Mhm.
We should be focused more of our kids. We should be doing this, we should be doing that. Can you speak to women who are listening to you right now and be like, wait, am I allowed to feel like, yes, I can have my kids and love them and spend time with them, but also have other interests
Yeah.
and want to thrive in other areas in my life? What do you tell to women who just related to that thought and like, I didn't realize that I had permission for that?
I think you have to kinda think about, does anybody ever say to your husband, do they often call your husband, like, a working dad? No, but they call us, like, working moms, right?
I never thought about that.
Like, no one says, oh, to our husbands, and, like, if you have a male partner, "Are you gonna go back to work?" No one ever said that to my
Right.
husband. My husband was offered paid time off for paternity leave, and he didn't even take it. Like, and
Mhm.
no one would question that. So I think we have once we can kind of, like, shift our perspective and say, like, they don't we spent all of this time. I went to college, I did, a year of volunteer service after college. Like, I knew I had so much to offer, but it did take a lot of deconstructing. I grew up very religious, and with that kind of as the pinnacle of, like, become a mom and that, and I remember, and I love my children dearly. And it's funny that I feel like I have to caveat that and say that, but I remember after I had my first, being pretty young, especially up here in the Northeast, I feel we brought him home, and I was in the bedroom, and I held him, and I was like, "What did I do?
Mm.
Like, this is so much responsibility, and it's on me." Like, no one's looking to Matt, my husband, to say when his diaper needs to be changed or when he needs to be fed. And that, I think after that and seeing how this isn't exactly the feelings that I thought I was gonna feel. I thought I was just gonna feel, like, so happy all the time, and, like, and I didn't, and I felt like that was okay. Luckily, I also, like I said, I do have, 3 sisters too, and they're younger than me, but seeing them, my one sister's an author. She wrote her book with 3 little kids during COVID, like, on her lap.
Wow.
My sister has built her, hair salon to a very successful business with her 2 kids. My other sister's a nurse with 3 kids. So, we all kinda give each other permission, not by audibly saying it, but by seeing other women live that path and that dream, and I think that's what's important. I think that the more we kind of push the edges ourselves, we give other women in our life the influence and the power to make those choices too.
I completely agree. It's like leading by example,
Exactly.
right? Like if I can do it, then so can you.
Right.
What would you say? Because I feel like this is like the first objection that comes after having this conversation.
Mhm.
Then the first objection is, yeah, but I can't just pick up and do something else. Like I have to take care of my kids and I have to put dinner on the table every night and I have to wake up early with my kids and I have to change those
Mhm.
diapers and I have to do all these things. I can't just say one day, well, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to start working and people are just going to have to figure it out. What do you think would be like the first step to getting your life set up in a way that feels a little bit more like, yes, you can have other things beyond having kids?
Well, I think the first step is dreaming. In all honesty, what I like to tell people is, like, your desires provide you with direction. So if you have this desire in your heart, like, I never had a desire to necessarily start a marketing agency. Like, 10 years ago, that's wasn't what it was, but I had a desire for flexibility, for freedom, for building a brand on social media. I really enjoyed that part of what I did. And then the other part of that is, like, realizing that everything is a season. So, I had children that never slept. But I would take messy action. I would take one step at a time to say, this is the next thing that I'm gonna do, or kind of just, like, following those intuitive nudges too to say, "I really like this. Maybe I could do this on my own." I think that's really important, and I don't see enough women really owning their expertise and saying, like, I could talk to somebody and look at what they're doing in their life and say, "Oh my gosh, you're an expert at, like, you could build a course on that. You could coach people on that. Like, you could
Yeah.
do so much," but we're so ingrained in kind of that corporate mentality of, like, this is how we have to do things.
Yeah.
So I think it's having an open mind too to those desires.
you have this wellness center and you're doing the social media and things are flowing, but then something happens to your son.
Mhm.
Can you tell us that story?
Sure. So at the time, my son was 5 years old and his name is Declan. He is autistic. And I had a 3-year-old, Brian, and I also had a 6-month-old, KK. My husband worked from home for the most part, but he had to go to a meeting somewhere local, and his office was in the boys' bedroom. And I don't know if anybody's seen on TikTok lately, but there's a thing called, like, living room families, and
Wait,
kids
what is this? What is
so
this?
a living room family is, like, when your kids are always hanging out in the living room, they're watching TV, they're playing their games, because back in, like, the 80s and 90s, a lot of us spent a lot of time in our bedrooms,
Mm.
right? Like, we weren't all together as a family, like, dad sat down and watched TV. So there's this big conversation around living room families. Well, my children are living room kids, like, they're always together, and it was a rainy summer day, and they had found a big jar of change, and they were fighting over it, and they ended up pouring it all over the floor, and they had been building boats out of Amazon boxes. So we had ripped up Amazon boxes, the change all over. I have the 6-month-old, and I was talking to my friend Mari on the phone, and Declan, so again, he's 5, we live in a very small house, and he gets mad at Brian, and he decides to go upstairs to his bedroom. So I don't think too much of it, and it's about probably 2 minutes pass by, and I hear screaming outside, and I hang up. I say, I have to go. I have to go. I hear a kid screaming." And it was like a noise I had never heard, and I said to Brian, who was only 3 at the time, "Do you hear that screaming? Where is this coming from?" And I'm walking around and looking around, and out of my left eye, I see my son in the driveway, Declan, and it just hits me, like, the only way he could have gotten out there is through the window, which is on the 2nd floor. So, I don't remember necessarily how I got him inside, to be honest, but he was walking. He walks inside, I scream and fall to my knees. He doesn't have a scratch on him. But I'm thinking, and also at 5 years old, he did not speak yet. So he would say words, but he didn't speak in sentences. So I go upstairs and look out the window and I see what happened, and I almost fainted. Like, I couldn't hold I was like, "Oh my god." And we had this Fisher Price wagon, and the wheels had been broken. So I don't know how it came apart, but my husband had put it in the back, and one of the wheels was on this little patch of cement that he landed on, and the metal pole was sticking straight up, and it was untouched, but I saw that, and everything else flashed before my eyes. So I called my husband, and he's like, "Megan, you have to call 911." Like, I couldn't even process thinking. But, so I said, "Okay, I'll" because I was like, "How do I get them all to the hospital?" Like, my brain was not, and, he's like, "You have to call 911." So I called 911, I called my sister, and the entire town came. And what was this glimmer of hope in the entire situation too was that recently we had won be a police officer for a day. So at the time there was a woman, Officer Kara, and she knew the boys because they got to go in her car, and she knew that Declan was autistic. She knew that he didn't speak, and she was off duty, but she heard the call and she came. I could cry. So what I didn't realize at the time was they took him away from me into a room so they could ask him questions. I didn't know that's what they were doing because my brain was not working, like I said, and one of the police officers, an older man came up to me and he was very intimidating, and he's like, "Do you know how lo" and he was kind of reprimanding me. "Do you know how far that was?" I was at least 20 feet, and I was like, I didn't measure it. Yeah, I can understand, but what I then kind of deduced after was that he was trying to see if I pushed him out, and that just, like, killed me. So one of my friends, had worked in the legal system, and she called me and she's like, "Don't be surprised if you get a visit from people." Also, with my big heart, the week before, I had applied to be a foster parent, which I don't know why. I thought I could take, and they called me the next day for an interview, and I was like, "I don't think you want me right now." Like, so that he broke both of his feet, but he was out of cast in 10 days. It was pretty miraculous. Kids' bones at that age are very quick to heal. What was really interesting is, again, like, because he didn't speak in sentences at that time, So we never really got the full story until like 2 years later. And all of a sudden one day he just said, "Remember that time?" And then told us what happened was he had seen a cartoon movie where the brother and sister get into a fight, and the brother leaves and jumps on the roof and runs away. So that's what he was trying to reenact, but we didn't have a roof underneath. And so what he did, I just assumed that he fell out of it because we have, like, lower windows, but what he did was he slid out and hung by his hands and dropped. So, after that, I mean, I have the best sense of direction, and for, like, a month after, I would be like, "How do I drive home?" Like, my brain was so still in fight or flight, and it really just it changed the course of our lives. Because after that, it was just like, I only wanted to be doing something that I loved when I was away from them because he had a lot of therapies he was going to. I also drank way more wine than I ever should have been or wanted to, and I saw that habit and I was like, "This is not what I want for my life."
Mhm.
So it led me to actually completely giving up drinking because I saw that in stressful times, that's what I leaned on.
Mhm.
I ended up taking yoga teacher training, like, it really, really shifted so much for us, but it was a really terrifying experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that whole story. I'm here, like, people can't see me on the podcast, like, covering my mouth, just imagining, like, the horror of knowing that your kid just fell out a second story
Mhm.
window and what to do. And I totally relate to the how do I get them to the hospital?
Right.
I had a situation where my son, my oldest, was in school and they called me in because he got sick. So I went to get him and it turns out that he was having a seizure. And I recognized the signs because
Mhm.
he had had a seizure before. I wasn't
Ugh.
there, but they described to me what had happened.
Ugh.
So when I saw this, my first impulse was to pick him up to go put him in the car to take
Mhm.
him to the
Right.
hospital. But as soon as I picked him up, he was just like a sack of
Stiff.
potatoes, like
Oh.
dead weight. Like I'm like, the reason I stopped myself is because I don't think I can carry him
Right,
to
right.
the
We
car.
yeah.
Like my brain was not working. It's like I put him down and immediately called 911. But like that's your first. It's like I need to get them to the hospital. Like
Right.
how do I do
Just
that?
how do I get 3 kids in the car with I was like, "Oh my god, how am I
Right,
gonna do this? How am I gonna get them into the hospital?" And
right.
then, like, yeah.
Realizing there's a
Mhm.
better solution.
Call the ambulance.
There's a better solution.
Exactly.
So I totally hear you, and I know that this was a real pivotal moment. What was going on with the wellness center at the time? Like I hear you on the stopping the habit of drinking when you're feeling stressed. Like you realize that something needed to change.
Exactly, yeah.
How did you go from that to realizing this is burnout and I need to make a
Mhm.
drastic change in my life?
So it was I continued to work, I was working about 30 hours a week, and I was also selling makeup on the side. So,
Because why not?
why
Because
not,
because
just, like, I thrive in chaos,
right.
and I created more but makeup is something that I always it was like, I needed
And applying to be a foster parent at the
exactly,
same
like,
time. Because like,
yeah, just, like,
that's what
just
we do, right?
exactly.
We just think of something and we do it.
Yes,
Like,
just
why
go
not?
for it. I'm like, "Oh," so that I was selling makeup and I was really having a lot of fun with it, and I was
Mhm,
having a lot of fun with making videos and stuff. It was actually the year that Facebook Live started,
mhm.
and my sister had gotten married in Vegas, and I went live for the first time, like, as soon as it was, like, in beta or something, and I was like, "Oh my god, I love this. This is so fun."
Nice.
Like, where most people are like, don't like being on video on social media, I loved it. And so I was making videos, and, at the time, the woman that I work with who is, like, the co-founder with me, she saw one of the videos that I had it was a picture, and I had taken it in our facility, but I was then created a graphic with it, like, outside of work, um, but she didn't like that and wanted all of my attention on the business, and I was
Mhm.
like, "I don't have time for this." So I literally we had a conversation, we're still friends to this day, but she, brought up these concerns and I was like, "I'm out. I'm done. Like, I have reached my max." The other part that I also noticed in myself, during this time of working in the wellness facility, I became a certified lactation counselor. So I went back to school to train to do that with the kids. I also was the director of marketing and I was teaching breastfeeding, running breastfeeding, and became a doula and childbirth educator. So I burnt myself out on the information too of, like, I had breastfed all 3 of my children, and I helped many, many women in our area, but then when I was sitting through a lot of the groups, I found myself a little bit, like, resentful, and I'm not that kind of person. I was just kinda like, "I have 3 kids, like, you gotta just get over it." Never did I say that to anybody, but in my I was just, like, feeling burnt out,
Yeah.
and I was like, "This isn't right. This is a sign that I need to listen to." So I think it just made the decision very easy when I was feeling that kind of conflict. I was like, "I'm done." Like,
Can
yeah.
we pause on that feeling
Yes.
for a second? On the resentful
Mhm.
feeling. What were you resentful of?
I think, there was people who were coming asking the same questions time and time again, and I was like, "You either do it or you don't." Like, that's how in my head, I would never say that to another human, and I understand, like, it was just I was burnt out with my own life
Right.
with the job, and when I was feeling that, like, "Well, I have 3 kids, you just do it." Like, I didn't have time to be, anxious all the time or whatever. I was anxious a lot, but I didn't have time to, like, sit and talk about it as much. It was kind of like that jealousy of, like, people were able to ask for help, and I wasn't. And when I saw that and saw that, like, I wasn't having as compassionate response, I knew that meant that, like, I needed more healing.
I relate to that feeling so much that I have suffered from
Mhm.
depression, and I would become jealous
Mhm.
of people who suffer from depression and they say, I couldn't get out of bed all day,
Mhm. Oh my gosh, I could relate to that so
right?
much.
And I'd be like, isn't that nice?
Right, right.
Right? While I was feeling depressed and I didn't want to get out of
Mhm.
bed all day, but I had to get up
Mhm.
and give the kids breakfast and get myself to work and give myself lunch and feed the family dinner. And I had to do all of that through the depression.
Right.
So I want to like, and I'm getting teary eyed right now just thinking about it because that is so real that when you're starting to have issues with yourself, right? Like with how you're handling things and you see that, wow, there's other people who are able to ask for help, right?
Mhm.
Who are able to voice what is it that they're going through and what they want and what they need. And we're here trying to suck it all in and trying
Mhm.
to like push everything down and say, like, well, isn't it nice to that
Right.
to have the ability to ask for help, right? When really like the problem is we need to acknowledge these signs in ourselves. We need to
Exactly.
start helping ourselves so that we can start asking for help. So I totally relate to that
Mhm.
feeling so much. So what happened after you decide I'm gonna leave the wellness center? I need to be home
Mhm.
like just for my kids.
So I said to myself, "I need to not work for a year." Like, I need to because I knew that I would very quickly find something. I like to say, like, my party trick is that I've gotten almost every job that I had without a resume.
Hmm.
And I knew that I would find something. I would, like,
Yeah.
I would say something to somebody, and I was like, "No, I'm giving myself a year to really." So once a year was up, I was like, "I need something more." Like, I really like being social and being out, and I like working towards goals. I like being creative, especially online. So after that, I did work at Merrimack for a little while because I was at a lacrosse game and told somebody I'd like to work there, and then he hired me.
Hmm.
But at that same time is when I went and did, Uncover, which was Kimberly Pendleton's, coaching program, and I was like, "I'm just doing this for me." Like, I'm a lifelong learner, I love doing things like that, and I was like, "I don't know what I'll ever do with this, but I'm gonna take this time to do it for me." And that very quickly turned into starting an online life coaching business.
It's almost like you have that chip in you that just w- you see something that you want and then you just go after it. It's like if somebody's listening and says like, "Wow, it must be so nice to think of something to say this is something that I want and go for it." What do you think is that the makeup of that chip? How do you get somebody who's looking at you saying, "How can you just think of something and do it? How can you take such action, such confidence, right? Such confident action on things when I'm here trying to make one life work. It seems like you've had nine already,
I know, it
right?
does, it seems like I'm 200 years old and have,
Right.
like, so many jobs. But I think part of being an oldest child, people pleaser, like, I knew and what I have now, like, after deconstructing a lot of it in therapy and things like that, like, there's some things that I did to adapt to the world around me, and I knew that was also a skill too. So, um, but I also have kind of a if I fail, like, that's okay. Like, I'm not super afraid of that. I'm not afraid even really to fail publicly. If it doesn't work out, I'm a manifestor in human design, so I have to move with my I really have to move with, like, the desires that I have, and that's always been a little bit of my personality.
Mhm.
So, I never want anyone to look and say, "Why can't I do that too?" Because I think we all can in different ways. But I think also it's that, you know yeah, it's just like I don't wanna say I'm definitely not fearless, but it is that trust in myself that if it doesn't go the way that I expected, like, I'm gonna be okay. And I also am in a partnership where I'm privileged to the fact that, like, he makes the money,
Mhm.
and right now, this time feels a little bit like we all need more I have 3 kids, sports, all of those things. It is, it's tough out there. But,
Yes.
when we first got married and stuff, it was like he made enough to take care of our family, so what I was doing was kind of like a bonus.
Mhm.
So I think that also, when your nervous system feels calm in experiences like that, you can kinda go after what you want,
I
right?
love it that you said that because that is so true. This is something that I run into just working with clients. There's a kind of client who has their basic needs
Mhm.
met,
Right.
right? Either because they have a spouse who pays for things or because they have a full-time job that
Mhm.
pays for the bills, right? Like the safety is coming from somewhere, and starting a business is kind of like, let's see how this goes. It kind of feels like an adventure.
Mhm.
While there's
Yeah.
different kind of people that I meet where they just left their job or they just got laid off or they just, left a certain situation and they need to make money right now. And that sense of desperation, right, is not something that really goes extremely well with going on an adventure, right?
Right.
Right? If I'm going on an adventure, I know there's going to be ups and downs.
Right.
If I feel like this is something that I absolutely need, then my actions I feel like are going to be a little bit different.
Mhm.
So I just kind of like relate to that. So let's talk a little bit about this agency that you started now. So how did you and Chelsea, and by the way, if people have not checked out your podcast, like I love just like the two of you bring such different aspects of an intuitive business, right? You
Mhm.
both come from an intuitive background, but it's like one of you is a little more techy than the other, one of you is a
Mhm.
little more pragmatic than the other, and you kind of play off of that really well. So, everybody, I'm putting the link to the podcast below. Everybody needs to go and follow it
Thank you.
right now. It's the Intuitive Marketing Podcast,
Mhm.
and it's with Chelsea Forner
Mhm.
and Meg O'Neill. So, how did you guys decide to start an agency? You were doing some coaching before. So, where did this idea come about?
So I was doing coaching and I also had started my own agency.
Mhm.
And Chelsea and I met on TikTok and
Right.
we met through the different hashtags of intuitive marketing, intuitive business. And I kept seeing her come up and she was so consistent. And I was like, this is like good for her. Like she is so and I have a background as a Reiki master, energy work, in that space, and she was talking more about how she had just gone through human design and stuff, and I was like, "It seems like she's just beginning her journey, and she's so consistent." I was in awe of it, and so we had connected last year, and we had, like, a coffee chat, and she's like, I'm gonna start an agency." I was like, "Good luck to you, like, I'm doing it, this is hard work, but, like, anything that I can do to help," and we stayed in touch, and I have a networking group, and she started coming to it, and I we're able to, like, introduce each other to different people, and, um, we just were fast friends, and then in April of 2024, she said, "I had this download, and I just have to say, like, would you wanna, like, do this together, essentially?" And I was like, "This is awesome." Like, first of all, it's awesome that she, like, you know, took the t time to ask this, and second, it felt really natural in my body. I was like, "Yeah," and now, I am a very social person, like I've said, and I've had many people approach me for, like, partnerships, and I'm always like, "Oh, okay, we'll think about that, we'll think about that." And when she said it, I was like, "Yeah, there's something here." Like, And so I went back to her, and I'm usually, like, not this bold, and I was like, "If we're gonna do this, though, I need to be able to say, like, I am the co-founder, or I can't say, like, I work for somebody." And she was like, "Okay, great."
Right.
So that was our so now since then, I was saying recently how, like, we've shared money, like, we share money, obviously, like, we have this business together and financials, and every single step of the way, I'm just like, it feels easy, and it feels, like, so calm in my body. And I said to my husband in the beginning, I was like, I'm saying yes, and this feels so right. Even if she takes all the money, I don't even care." Like, not like there's like, we're paying out, for at this time, like so we were just so aligned, and we saw each other's strengths and, perceived weaknesses of my own, and, we're able to balance each other. And it has just been so amazing to be, partnered with her, and so now we have our agency. So she is the original founder of the Intuitive Marketing Collective, and then I came on to bring the social media side to it.
So you have mentioned human design a couple
Mhm.
times. For everybody who's not familiar with it, what is human design?
So I'm not trained in human design, but from what I can really what I understand, it's like psychology and astrology mixed together.
Mhm.
And during the time after my son had fallen, maybe the year after, I had a reading with a famous human design reader. I think her name's AC Brown. And it was one of the most illuminating things that I had ever had. And she's telling me all about being a manifester and energy and things like that. And I was like, oh my God, this is like me. This is, because I get really energetic and can start projects and be that, but I don't love seeing them through all the way. Like, I don't wanna be with you from the end of time to,
Mhm.
I wanna initiate it and I wanna start it. Um, and I always felt bad about that. So having this reading really was left, I was like, "Oh, like this feels good. This is great."
From what I have seen of human design, and I'm actually going to put a link below so that
Mhm.
people learn a little bit more about human design. But yeah, it is like in order for you to get your human design chart, it does involve your birthday,
Mhm.
your
Time.
time that you
Mhm.
were born, the location where you were
Right.
born, like that kind of matters. Like
Yes.
where were the stars exactly?
Yeah.
And it describes for you the like parts of your life, essentially parts of your
Mhm.
personality, so that you have a little bit more awareness of where you should be taking, like
Mhm.
the things that you should be leaning into versus the things
Exactly.
that you are like, that's just not natural to me. So
Right.
it's one of those things that's like whatever like really resonates with you,
Exactly.
right? If that helps you, that's great.
Right.
So I have done my human design chart done before, and I don't even remember
What you
the kind. I don't even
are.
remember what I am, but there are quizzes out there.
Yes.
So I'm gonna put a link to one below. And yeah, to me, is whatever helps you understand yourself better, right?
Exactly.
Like whatever that. And I know that there's an entire science around it. So I love it that Chelsea can bring that, and you guys bring that into the agency, right?
Exactly.
So tell me about that, because you guys are a marketing agency. You're creating funnels, you're creating
Mhm.
landing pages, you're writing emails. So what does that have to do with intuitiveness in the business or in the client's business?
There's been such a long time of doing marketing and business in such a, a bro marketer way. And we really, and there's other businesses that have realized this too, but that there's a way to do it intuitively. Not everybody has to be on social media. Not everybody has to do email funnels. I sold out my first program um, without ever doing an email funnel. I've actually only done an email funnel since working with Chelsea, and I had a six-figure business before that.
Yeah.
So, that didn't feel good to me, it was hard for me to do. So, bringing intuition in is like working with these amazing experts and saying, "What feels good to you?" Also being aware of their energy, where, the seasons of life. I think these are all things that are really, really important to us. And that's why we bring it to the agency. We bring it into the podcast and in the community as well, so that other people can kind of have a language around talking about, like, I was listening to your podcast with Kate Northrup before this, and I read her book years ago
Mhm.
and have used cycle syncing since then. And that's like a common thing that we talk about in the agency.
Yeah.
Being able, like, we'll send each other messages, Chelsea and I, like, well, I'm in my luteal phase. So, like, this isn't a great time for me to be making videos. And so it's like really giving people this basis of being able to communicate in a way that feels really good and authentic to them.
Yeah. And I guess that's what gets to the core of intuitiveness is
Mhm.
doing things that come easier, right? Knowing your human design so that you
Mhm.
know what are the things that you can fall into naturally, what are the things you should be delegating, like that kind of thing, which I think is fascinating.
Mhm.
So that's why the word intuitive is in everything
Yes,
that you guys do.
it is the core of what we do, and what we honor, and we also are really embodied in it too, so we will, we're gonna do a debrief in our community of the launch that we just had, I was attending a funeral, Chelsea had house stuff going on, like, we come back and say, "What are we really feeling? We're gonna push this out a week." Like, that's not failure if we push out, like, the deadline and stuff. But we're gonna show the people in our community that so that they can say, "Okay, this like, I don't have to take what this like, you know, famous name coach says I have to follow exactly. Like I can make it my own too, because that's what's gonna lead to sustainability and not burnout."
Absolutely. Like the moment that you're white knuckling through any
Exactly.
kind of strategy, you know that that's not going to be sustainable.
Right.
And I see so many people that start really, really strong, right?
Mhm.
Go in a particular strategy and then they just burn out and quit.
Right.
It's like that. It's like they started out really
Exactly.
strong and then it's just cold turkey
Right.
because they just can't handle it anymore. So I love that you guys are building an agency around let's make this business last.
Yes. Yeah, because these women are such experts and they have so much to offer the world, and we want to see the right people get in front of them, and we're like their biggest champions.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
love that for you guys. And I love Chelsea. So it's my dream that that one day the three of us can be
Yes.
together and the three of us can just like a powwow on this
Oh my
podcast.
god, we would
So
and I have to just, like, sing your praises for helping us get the podcast started.
oh
So, Ina, we did a program with her, and you gave us the structure that we needed and kind of the accountability too to say, "We're gonna get this done." And one of your biggest pieces of advice was, like, you have to meet in person because Chelsea and I, as we started this business, we never met in person. And we got to meet in person in September,
I
and
love
it was
that.
so awesome, and we got so much great footage. Um, but since then, and with your because this does not come intuitively to me, but with your instruction on putting the ads in and things like that, we did that, and we've been so great about getting our episodes up, and we had a stranger come through the funnel. Yeah.
No.
It's
What?
so exciting. So we decided to do a paid workshop to lead into our community funnel. And we did the ads for it. We had our workshop. So this woman joined our workshop. And then the whole point was to then, get into the community. And so she found us just from the podcast world.
Wow.
And so we were so excited because we're like, we've been working really hard. Like she has, Chelsea has a son, and we do the podcast at night. We do them on Saturday mornings after soccer practice. Like we're fitting this into our life, and to have that proof of concept was like,
That is
yeah,
amazing. That
yes,
is
so
so cool. I'm
exciting.
so happy for you guys. And
Thank you.
thank you so much for the praises. Working with you guys was just a dream because like you know what to do, right? Like we were sitting down to map out a plan, but you guys were just ready, right? Like this podcast was is amazing. I think everybody needs to go and listen to it,
Thank
especially if they
you.
care about uh, building their businesses in a really intuitive way.
Mhm.
That's all you guys talk about. Chelsea gets into really, really practical things in
Mhm.
there. You
Strategic.
really talk about making sure that this is an intuitive affair and how do we make that fit into our lives. So, like, everybody needs to go and listen to that podcast. So, I'm putting the link below. Everybody needs to go.
Thank
And
you.
if you like typing things in, it's called the Intuitive Marketing
Podcast.
Podcast. All
Correct.
right. So, everybody needs to know that. I just have two more questions. What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have of you as a successful businesswoman?
Ooh, that is so interesting. I in the last year, I've become much more comfortable with people not liking me.
Good for you.
It's still hard, let me tell you, as a former people pleaser, um, but knowing my human design is to repel some people and draw some people in. Um, I have gotten I've had to get more comfortable with that. So, I think that the misconception would be that, maybe that I think I'm too bold for some people, to be honest. part of what I share very, very authentically. I recently, with a friend, started another community that I'm no longer uh, co-founder of, for bisexual people in hetero presenting relationships. That was terrifying, first of all,
Yeah.
but I think that it really, bothers people when you live authentically and you don't make sense. Like, I
Mhm.
don't make sense to everybody,
Mhm.
and that makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah, and people like to put people in
In
boxes,
boxes, yes.
right? It's like, for somebody with an accent like me, like people want to know where you're from,
You they
right?
right, because they wanna be like, "Okay,
They
you're
need to
in this
they
box."
need
Like,
to
you're
know
either
that
in the European box or
yes,
you're in the South
or you're in
American.
the South American box, or you like which box
Yeah,
do we
which
put you in?
box?
So you know what I do and anybody listening to this is going to totally recognize that I say this. Whenever anybody asks me like where I'm from, I just go, I am from Venezuela, South America. I speak Spanish and the accent is not going anywhere, even though I've been here for over 25 years. And that kind of like puts them in the right box, right?
Right.
It's not like the Venezuelan who just got out of a plane yesterday. It's the Venezuelan who's been here a while, but I couldn't tell because of the
Right.
accent. Like people like to put you in boxes,
They do.
right? It makes people at ease.
Right.
So, so yeah. So I I can understand the making people a
Right.
little bit
I don't
nervous just
fit
by
in a
being you.
conventional box. I parent my children differently. I do things that I'm online. I think that that's, like, something that's really not comfortable when you're, like, at school pickup all the time. Like,
Yeah.
people don't know where to put you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so weird. People I would like to live in a world where it literally doesn't matter,
I know.
right? Where like it literally doesn't matter. Um I have been in conversations with people who really, really need to know what that person's sexual orientation is or what
Mm.
that person's, like where they live and how much money they make. And I'm like, what are you gonna do with that
Right.
information? How does that information help you? Like what does it calm down for you
Right.
knowing that? It's knowing that you're right, knowing that you make more money than them, is knowing that,
Right. It's like a higher people wanna be in a hierarchy.
yeah,
I think working with women for so long too, and I'm that type of person that, like, you'll be in the grocery store and somebody will tell me their life story and what I realized along the way is that everybody has baggage.
yeah,
Everybody has secrets, and everybody has a part of themselves that, like, they don't want the world to see. So, you can try to put anybody in a box, and it literally means nothing
yeah,
because they could surprise you the next day. The other thing is, like, we're allowed to change.
yeah,
So, I think that if more people could kind of just give people permission to change and to develop who they are as a person, we would all feel a lot less, like, pressure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, especially for ourselves. When
Right.
we stop
Right.
judging others, there's a chance we may stop judging ourselves.
Right. Right.
So my
So
last
healing.
question for you is if anybody who's listening, if they had to do what you are about to tell them to do, and they have to do it in the next 24 hours because it's going to make their lives better, because it's going to make their businesses better, what do you think that thing is?
It's so simple, but it's not easy. And it's to spend at least 5 to 10 minutes in quiet a day because we don't do that and we busy ourselves so much that we are being so impacted by everybody else's energy, right? So, you know, e energy is so much more than like the, spiritual, right? Just being in a school, if you're a teacher, like all the energy of all the kids and stuff. How can you just carve out a few minutes a day where you can just sit and breathe and hear your own voice? Because you're never going to go wrong if you can get in tune with that. And what I used to tell new moms, because people will say, I don't have the time. I can't do it. Once you get your kids, put them in the car seat. Don't turn your car on yet and just close your eyes and breathe and feel connected to, the earth underneath you or whatever it is. And just make that clear space to hear your desires. Because if you just dedicate to listening to that and taking that next step, maybe it's to go get coffee at a certain place, or maybe it is to quit your job or whatever it is. If you follow those breadcrumbs, like, you land exactly where you're supposed to be.
So, Meg, thank you so much for doing this. It's been such a great
This is so
conversation.
good. Thank you for
Can
having
you
me.
please tell everybody where to go and follow you, where to go and get more of you?
I would love if you come and follow me on Instagram because that's where I am the most active. And my personal page is at Meg O'Neill with 2 L's, 10. And you can follow us at the Intuitive Marketing Collective on Instagram. Listen to our podcast and send me a DM that you listen to this because I would just love to thank you and connect with you.
And I'm going to put all those links below. Thank you so much for being here. You are amazing.
So are you. You're an amazing host, and it's like been a joy to watch you do all of this. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. And thanks everybody for joining us in this conversation. And I hope you will hit subscribe and follow wherever you are so you don't miss another episode of the Superhumans podcast.